discussion on leaving no one behind. Let me try to make this the stage. Since its launch in 2015, Uganda's national identification system, Ndagamuntu, has played a pivotal role in shaping the nation's identity landscape. The transformation system has resulted in the creation of Uganda's first comprehensive national identification register. Despite its significant contributions, achieving the goal of registering all citizens, including birth registration, there remains a challenge. The 2022 Auditor General's report unveiled that only 25.9 million Ugandans had completed registration, leaving approximately 17.4 million unregistered. And so tonight we sit here to have a deeper discussion entitled Leaving No One Behind, Assessing Uganda's Readiness for the New Ndagamuntu. And my guests this evening are men and women of substance. Let me introduce the ladies that have made it on time and are joining us tonight. I have from the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, Atori Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us, Atori. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, Patrick.
And also joining us is a lecturer at Makerere University, Dr. Nansubuga Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Elizabeth.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here.
We shall also be joined later by the Honorable Silas Agon, who is a member of Parliament representing Kumi Municipality, and somebody from the Ministry of Gender and NIRA, because NIRA is very crucial in this very important discussion tonight. We want to assess how far we have moved in this journey of our national identification process, what challenges have been made, and how can we move the next step. Let me begin with you, lecturer from Makerere University, Dr. Nansubuga Elizabeth, to make your own, to set the ground for us on the Ndagamuntu, where we stand now, and what you as a citizen, but also as a lecturer, have been able to see the benefits and maybe the challenges as we talk.
Thank you very much. Looking at where we are now, indeed, NIRA has done a lot of work, given that this was the first time we are rolling out IDs, and looking at the phase we are going into in 2025, having the new second generation of IDs. My focus, what I have done in my work as a lecturer and doing research on civil registration, I would like to focus on the challenges associated with certain populations that are excluded. And that is the focus on children. There are several challenges, but if we are going into the second generation IDs and we do not address the challenges that we have now, then we are bound to have more population, more of these populations excluded. And the focus would be on certain categories that I would like to highlight for the children. Children who are born of war, children born to single mothers are born to have certain peculiarities in getting IDs or registered, children without fathers, fatherless children.
How is that even possible?
How is it possible? I can walk to a hospital today and acquire sperms, but I would not have the identity, the name, the clan, which is required if I'm registering for a birth certificate, but also if I'm registering for a national ID. Because of the patriarchy in some of our laws, that I need details of a father. We have seen children being told, bring male relatives. So where do I get those relatives? But children who are born during war, they may not know the fathers, either born to rebels, they may not have those identities. So we have street children, we have several categories of children who are excluded. So these are bound to be, if we don't have certain changes and the challenges remain, it will impact the second generation ID, meaning excluding further those who have been excluded.
I know I don't want to look into the second generation ID, but really, before we even go to the second generation, let us give it to them. They have actually tried to make this document a very important document. Having a national ID now is serious business. In fact, if you don't have it, your life is in trouble, because at every step you need it. And I want to say that they have really tried to do their best, haven't they?
Yes.
Elizabeth Atori.
Yeah, you do say something that speaks to the relevance of a national ID currently. In order to get services, jobs, health, education, one does require a national ID. And this is stemmed from the law, which is the Registration of Persons Act, that allows government to require that citizens furnish their IDs before they can get services. And we've gone milestones as a country from where we started. In 2015, when that law was passed, we were a country without identification. The most that we had were passports, driving permits, but these, in terms of the comprehensiveness, the coverage, was very limited. So we see now, with the onset of the 2015 mass registration, we now have a full national ID system, the one that we are calling the Ndagamuntu system right now. And 2 years after that, the World Bank did some research on how we were doing as a nation, and we were ranked 16 out of 187 countries, and we were the 16th worst in terms of coverage for registration of IDs. In 2022, the report that you referred to shows that we've moved milestones. About at least 25 million Ugandans have national IDs. But as you clearly state, there are in fact some challenges, because whilst we've managed to move steps ahead, there are particular people that haven't managed to move that journey with us. If you look at particular populations like the vulnerable, speaking very specifically to older persons, we've seen a number of media reports that have been put out there concerning older persons that aren't able to get their social assistance grants for empowerment. So about 10,000 are being excluded, according to the research that we did. The Initiative for Social and Economic Rights did research. And from that research, we discovered that because of errors, because of access to the registration centers, older persons were actually unable to benefit from government services. And if now we are looking specifically at the topic, not leaving anyone behind, and actually being able to attain our sustainable development goals, of which a clear target is to ensure that every single person is registered in this country, then what happens to those that are unregistered? Or what happens to those that are discouraged because of inefficiencies in biometrics? The Auditor General report does spotlight some of the inefficiencies. The fact that the system sometimes needs some manual input. Even after a person comes in, they still need a registration officer, the IT officer, to come and manually upload that information, so that then it's uploaded into the system. And that has caused a little bit of delays. So beyond the challenges on access to registration centers, there are challenges around errors. And we need, as a country, to start to think through going into the national ID of 2025, the new ID that we are all anticipating. We need to start to think through, how do we ensure that we are able to cover these gaps so that we are not leaving any demographic behind.
Dr. Nsubuga, do you appreciate that the national identification system, we are actually have been taking baby steps, teething problems, really? Give it to them that in the last 8 years or so, what has been achieved is something to celebrate. Are you in that kind of, do you believe that? Do you see that?
Yes, a lot. There's a lot we can celebrate from what NIRA has done, but I want us to celebrate 100% by 2030. Okay. If we look at the SDG 16.9, leaving no one behind. So a lot has been done by NIRA, linking national IDs to social services, but the lack of celebration, the little lack of celebration, is for people who are excluded. I can't access HIV services because I don't have a national ID. I can't get a phone line, a number, a SIM card because I don't have an ID. I can't get a job because I don't have an ID.
How much of that is also, paged on the characteristic, the nature of us Ugandans who want to do things last minute? Because there's a person who should actually be trying to get their own IDs, but they're reluctant to do so. I remember whenever they were saying we'll go for registration, every time they say we're remaining with 2 days, the place will be jammed up. Everybody will be there. There is also behavior of us Ugandans who perhaps don't want the document or trying to do things last minute. And then you go and overwhelm the system. Because if they have told us it is important to get a national ID, you are able-bodied Ugandan, there's an office near you, why can't you just go and get it? Because many of us decided to get these documents at the very last. Who do we blame for such?
there is the mindset of the individual being lazy to go in the last 2 days, but then there are also people who have tried and the system will.
Okay.
So we can have challenges at individual level. Yeah, just me waiting for 2 days, but then we also have system challenges. So NIRA should try to address the system challenges, then we can also see how we address the individual challenges. But the focus is on the system challenges. Just
imagine, 13 million ID cards remain uncollected. Somebody took trouble to go and take a picture, to go and register, and you have your card there. You have 13 million Ugandans who have not even collected their cards. Now, what does that speak about us?
Patrick, I mean, you do... The statistics are glaring, right? So you do ask the right questions. Why do we have 13 million Ugandans who haven't yet collected their IDs? And whilst it's true that in Kampala the registration centers are quite near, and for the urban it would be easier to walk to a registration center here at NIRA to pick an ID, if we are looking at the more remote districts, with one NIRA office or the second one at the sub-county, and you have expanses of villages that do not have NIRA registration centers because of the distance and because of the lack of motivation when they we've gotten research that...
So motivation meaning what, Elizabeth?
I'm explaining. Let's get to that. Let's get to that point, Patrick. If as an individual I've gone to a NIRA center 1 or 2 times and I've been told that the systems are down, because that's in fact an issue that we've seen on the ground. People have walked into centers and found that the systems are down and they are unable to be given assistance at that point. These are older persons. Think of an 80-year-old person that has to move about 5-6 kilometers on a border to get to a NIRA center. These are real challenges, I think, that we need to start to think through. And it brings us to the question of how have we as a country treated this national ID registration process? Have we put it all in one box and hope that everyone would fit into the box of registration? But what we need to do as a country is to start to unbox the categories of people that we are registering. We are registering older people. We are registering persons with disabilities that are unable on their own to move and therefore would need assistance in terms of...
People with special needs.
Yes, people with special needs. They would need NIRA to go to their actual locations to get them registered, or even when they go the first time, then they would need the cards delivered to them.
Okay, let me introduce another guest who has joined us. He's a member of parliament representing Kumi municipality, the Honorable Silas Agon. Thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for staying with us.
We are happy you got some time to come and join us. And with the topic, Leaving No One Behind, Assessing Uganda's Readiness for the New Ndagamuntu. Before we even talk about the journey, we're going to start the new series of national identification. I want your assessment on how far we have moved.
Now, first of all, it's good for us to reflect on our past and see what is it that we did well and what is it that we failed. That is very, very important because it informs our next action. And as Parliament, at least I'm aware that we have made the laws, the necessary laws. We have the policies. We have always provided a budget. But maybe the question is, for instance, in terms of the budget, what size? Uganda has a population which is moving towards 50 billion soon. Do we have enough capacity in terms of the human resource in NIRA to handle the issues of registration? So Uganda has tried to take steps, but I think the duty that we have right now is to check on the gaps and get the right medicine for the gaps. And we shall be ready. We shall be there.
You know, the issue here now is people with special needs and people with disability, the elderly. For example, some of them have missed out on the social assistance grant for the elderly because they don't have the ID. You know, and of course it will be an issue of budget to make sure that you have registration centers almost everywhere near to the people. But that means money, I suppose. How do you think that can be done?
First of all, what I feel is that, first of all, I'm in the right place. Parliament is the right place for us to start thinking about the thing. For us, on a daily basis, we're in touch with the people, and they tell us the challenges. You have talked about the older persons. There are those who are PWDs, People who have just lost their employment, or they lost their employment long time ago, they don't have any source of what? Income. They are really in a dire situation. So I think as Parliament, it is a matter of realizing that the issue of registration and having a proper register is a priority. It is no longer luxury. So it is about increasing the budget and accepting that we need a bigger workforce at NIRA, a situation that can be able to change our issue. But also we must adopt the new approach of the parish development model. For instance, now we are talking about people failing to pick their IDs. Why don't we take them to parishes? So Parliament should now move towards providing money so that we go to that level where we're even able to push IDs, for instance, to that parish. Because it's closer now to the person. From there now the LOCs can pick and take to the doorsteps. And that is it. Poverty is biting people. So Parliament must act now, and I think it's a wake-up call to us to do our work. In terms of legislation, we must really try to cover the gaps. In terms of policy, the policy must speak to the law. The law must speak to the policy. They must be linked. And we must implement, we must push government to implement what Parliament has passed. And that will change the situation. It is something that must be for everybody. And we also need to provide a budget for education of the masses. Public participation, to me, is a big bullet that we need. Let the people be brought on board. They should understand the importance of having an ID. And they should also know that these days it is no longer actually a luxury to have an ID. It is the first step that you have towards getting services from government. I have seen people suffer. In East Africa, if you want to travel, I'm told an ID can serve.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you are going to the airport and they ask you for a national ID and you have, and somebody has offered you a ticket for the first time, what are you going to do? You become like a missed call, and that is a very bad thing. So I think educating the masses on the importance of these national IDs is something critical, and therefore Parliament needs to allocate more resources.
Dr. Nansubuga, if somebody has registered and the card is just awaiting them to pick it, first of all, how was the registration done? And can that be the same process for people to be able to pick their cards? Because if you are able to register, then you should be able to pick your card. Was the registration different, or should they bring the cards at the very places where the people were registered, because that would make it easier for them? I don't get it that you can register and you don't pick your card.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's an issue of access, because the time when we got registered for IDs the first time, there was mass registration. I remember people registered at the university, like at Makerere University. But now for some of the unallocated, not for Makerere University, you now have to move to the different branches. But let's look at a transport cost, like for the poor rural households, it may not be easy to move.
But how did the poor
register? It was done at lower levels. The mass
so in other words, the cards should be brought to the lower levels where they registered from.
Yes, access.
But that means, according to Honorable, that would have a cost to it.
Yeah.
Because and that cost is necessary. There's no way we can avoid it. Because I can tell you, for us who are so close to the people on a daily basis, we have realized that there's a need for us to decentralize these services completely and take them to the what? To the people. So we just have to allocate resources, make sure that first of all we have regional centers, regional districts, empower those centers, and then take these things down to the people. I can tell you, for us, we can talk of 50,000 and we think it's little money. For you to board a bus from Ukumi to come to Kampala, it's a very expensive venture. You are not sure, first of all, that you will get that ID that they are telling you that is there. Where will you sleep? How much is the accommodation? The cost of being in a road that you don't know, traffic jam, too many borders, a lot of harassment on the road just by the environment. So that is what we go through.
There are some people who cannot make it, cannot come.
They cannot, even boarding that bus for the first time, they don't know where they are going.
But they don't have to come to Kampala because they're regional officers, I suppose.
Yes, but I think there's something more that we need to, so we need to go down there to
Elizabeth Atori, there's something I have seen that I appreciate with the national IDs, that people have attached a lot of importance on this document. In fact, most of us, I've seen, we don't even work with the original IDs. You know why? Because you don't want to lose it. You don't want anything to happen to it. Because we know also the time that you can spend trying to replace. You know, this is what I have been able to observe. If you ask people to give out the IDs, most of them will be showing you a photocopy. Why? The real copy original is at home safe, because they attach a lot of importance on this document. Is that your finding as well?
My finding is actually slightly different from your finding, Patrick. I've found that because of the stringent processes for replacement of IDs, and because of what people need to go through in order to have their ID replaced. I remember I was reading on social media at a certain point, and they were like, the national ID is much harder to get in this country than a passport. To get your national ID replaced, the process you need to go through is much more stringent than a passport. And so the importance that is attached to being able to maintain that ID and keep it is actually a good thing, because then people have started to understand the relevance of a national ID.
But isn't it a good thing for you to know that replacing it is just shouldn't be an easy thing? You know, because this is a document, you have to go through a process.
We need to create a balance,
there has to be a verification. if Dr. Nantsubuga is adding another name there, they have to find out why.
Yes, definitely.
It have to go through a commission of oaths.
But you can easily be deregistered.
There was a slight, I needed to correct some information on mine, and I did it, and I didn't go through a lot of trouble.
Well, Patrick, we need to look at this from a wider perspective. Imagine a person that a very large percentage of Ugandans are illiterate. And so if I am unable to even understand the information and the processes that I need to go through to replace my ID, for older persons, I'll give you a very clear example. If they need to change the errors in terms of age on their national ID, and we've seen that this is a very big problem for older persons to get the social assistance.
They don't change the age, they correct the age.
To correct the age, yeah. So if they need to correct their age to reflect their true age, they need to go before a commission of oaths.
Yeah, that's because that is a required step legally.
Yes, and that
required step will take some time. So do you want them to omit that step?
I don't want them to omit the step, but we need to know that there are costs attached to that step. If we are putting in place measures and we want to ensure that everyone is able to access a system, then we need to make sure that the system doesn't include barriers that stop people from getting and getting into the system.
And you know, when you're correcting those mistakes,
of the barriers,
when you're correcting those mistakes,
costs.
When you're correcting those mistakes, they're already mistakes. There's a cost to a mistake. You made a mistake, and that mistake is
who made the mistake.
In this particular case, let me just bring us back to a very live example. An older person in Karamoja knows their age on the basis of events that have happened. So they'll tell you when this chief was alive, Lokodo, when Lokodo was alive, that's when I was born, in the reign of Lokodo. As a person in Kampala, you are unable to place that particular person within their age bracket.
You assign them.
You assign them, look at them, and say, oh, you possibly look like you're 40 years old. In turn, that older person is actually 56 years old. Once they understand eventually that they were assigned 40 years old, of which this older person is illiterate, so it's a little bit difficult to understand these things. They'll understand when they are not getting SAGE, and they see their friends getting SAGE. So they come up to ask for registration or changing, correction of the age. And when they start to correct the age, they have to incur about 90,000 in terms of just the measures, commission of oaths, being able to get the form from NIRA for change, and getting NIRA also to verify that change and go through that system. So what that then means is we have about 10,000 older persons who are unable to get the social assistance grants for empowerment because of age errors.
Let me take that to Honorable Saila. So in that case, what should the government do together with NIRA? It's unfortunate NIRA is not out here now.
Yeah, government just has to accept that the issues of IDs is a priority. We just have to allocate more resources. The level of poverty in the country, a huge section of the population is unable to do what we want. We tell them do this, we command by law, but to implement that is very hard. So what I love to see government do now is a situation where we take, for instance, this issue of about oath, swearing of, take it to the village level, take it to the parish. Establish a day after a quarter and say today, at the end of the month, everybody will be here. If you have challenges of ID, the person swearing you will be here. And we correct errors. It makes life easy. And it's the duty of government to provide. After all, these are the people who pay tax. In whatever little they do, they also contribute to the tax, the revenue base of this country.
When you go to the NIRA head office in Kololo today, you really realize that the lines are no longer there, that there used to be many, long queues, and people take little time in the process. I think they have moved. I think there has been some,
improvement.
Yes, some improvement, that is what. I remember there's a time when people would wake up at 5, at 6 to line up there. It's no longer the case. Do you appreciate that?
Yes, there's a lot of improvement. NIRA has opened up more offices, even just in Kampala, and sometimes people don't have to move from up country, but there are still those cases that will still cause people to come to head office or to come to the division offices, especially during holidays. When the children have got holidays, there will be lines at NIRA.
So, but
there's a lot of improvement.
I know, Atori Elizabeth, I know of people in my own household who had to be pushed to go and get their card. Maybe if they wanted to correct something, they had to be pushed. But people were reluctant. And those are the cases that make the 13 million uncollected. You are able-bodied, you are within Kampala, the office is near you. Even here in Kampala, there could be tens of thousands of cards who the owners are reluctant to go and pick them. You have information, you have access. Where do you place these ones?
I think for those ones that are unable or have failed to get their IDs, there's really, I think for me, a question of how much information do these people have in order to access their IDs? Are they able to receive the information that they need to be able to walk into a center and say, okay, this is the procedure that I need to get?
All right.
One thing, Patrick, just a little bit. I think what we also need to ask ourselves are, what are the implications of not having an ID currently in Uganda? And do we see that people are being affected by that process? Like, what's the impact?
If you don't have an ID, your life can literally come to a standstill.
That's true. And if we look at individual cases, it stops moving away from a game of numbers, of these numbers of people who don't have IDs. It goes into what kind of livelihood are these people living who don't have IDs?
Hold on here. I want to introduce, we're lucky now. We have been joined in our Studio B by the Executive Director of NIRA, Rosemary Kisembo, is in our Studio B. I just want to find out whether she can be able to hear and even see us. Good afternoon, Rosemary, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Oh, yes, thank you so much. Oops, I almost had to go in and stand in and say, you know what, maybe you've done something good at NIRA. I'm going to stop there, so do it yourself. Make an assessment of how far we have come before even going to the second generation. I've been thinking here and telling the panelists that you have moved. There's some efficiency in your organization. There are 13 million who have not collected their IDs. Some of them, maybe they are themselves to blame, but others could be having challenges. Take it from there, Rosemary.
I want to start by setting certain records straight. NIRA has 27 million Ugandans identified with NINs. The cards not picked are 1.3 million and not 13 million. And the backlog of cases is far below 1 million. So I would like to first set that record straight. So NIRA was established in 2015 after the mass enrollment exercise to register people with 10 key roles identified in Section 5 of the Act: to create, maintain, and manage a national identification register, to register, to issue, allocate NINs, national ID numbers, issue NINs, register birth, and register death, and provide information for verification. I dare say that there is no other register in this country with 27 million people. I'm proud to be associated, therefore, with the National Identification Register. That said, there are 17 or so million who are not registered and therefore need a service. Most of the unregistered are children that were born after 2014. The statistic in our register indicates that there are only 2.5% of the population that is below 9 years that is on our register. Meaning that those people were born in the last 9-10 years of NIRA's existence and therefore have not interacted with the service. There are 24807,135 million people above the age of 60. There is 1202 and I think 035 above the age of 70. There are 305,000 people as at October 2023 enjoying SAGE. So I want to put this conversation in perspective. And I dare say the people accessing SAGE are almost more than the people in a, contribute at least to 50, 60, 70% of our public service. So I really want to put this conversation in perspective with those numbers. But as I have said, there is a number of people to whom we are accountable who have not been registered. NIRA is in 117 sites. We should be in 146. But government's resources confine us to 117 sites. NIRA, in the last mass enrollment, released 18,000 people to register at parish level. And during that 8-month period, cards were issued at parish level. Government hoped in 2016 when they brought the birth registration function that parents would also take responsibility to ensure that as soon as a child is born, a child is registered and is issued a NIN. That didn't happen. Some issues are on our side and some issues are on the citizen side, but that said, what is the way forward? I want to pick the example of the SAGE's budget. NIRA as an institution receives 59 billion shillings a year, of which 20 billion is wage. That means in a year, we are left with 39 billion shillings to register persons across the country. The SAGE budget on its own for the year is 91 billion. So NIRA has 2 or 3 people in an up-country station. And I'll take the example of Koboko. Koboko has 1 staff for 600,000 population. Government put a moratorium on recruitment for 2 years. So I think when we are looking at issues, an entity and its services, and the whole cohesion of government and even our stakeholders outside government, including the civil society, a civil society agency can take a service of finding out those who are not registered and even pay in billions of shillings and millions. In that same exercise, they could have gone with people from NIRA and registered the people and said, okay, we found 10 unregistered, but we've registered 15, as some of the development agencies have taken to doing. So in essence, I think the first thing we need to do as a country is look at this registration of our persons and our citizens as a collective responsibility. Even the information, I wish I was here today educating people on what is required to register a person. NIRA's communication budget annually is 146 million. The cost of this show is 10 million shillings. So I really want to highlight the dichotomy of the issues around registration and show that we each have a collective responsibility. I wish one day NTV could call me free for charge and say, come, and we are so concerned about our citizens, come and spend time explaining what papers they need. That said, I will go back to issues that have been raised around the SAGE. In 2021, we were given a statistics by the Ministry of Gender, and they highlighted that there were 11,000 people who didn't have NIN above the age of 80, and 55,000 wanted to change their age. To date, we have registered 9,000 of the 11,000 who did not have their NINs. And you can find that information out at Ministry of Gender. Now, the 55,000 who wanted to change their information, we wrote and advised Ministry of Gender, given the complexities of this information, even when we change and update and correct the errors of their date, we are not going to change their NIN. Since you see them every month, give them money, because they identify, they have a NIN. Give them money under that NIN, and as time goes, that NIN will be updated. But separate the two issues. Because you are physically interacting with this person, you see that they are above 80. You see that they deserve this. They have a NIN. It's just information on that NIN that needs to be corrected. Even as we await the correction of information, give them the service. That one is not in NIRA's docket. Because here is somebody. The money for you to give them was released. They have a NIN. You meet them every month, so there is no risk that they'll run away with money, because they are old anyway. So in essence, there are certain, I think this conversation needs to be collective, holistic, and each of us know that we have a role to play in helping the registration service within the means of our economy. I will now move to the issue that has been raised. In the next few months, we will get budget, and we will repeat this exercise at parish level. And it's my cry to the media houses, take that opportunity to raise the same alarm that now the exercise is on, go and register. Rather than taking the post-mortem voucher approach. The exercise has ended and you have not registered. So we have a collective responsibility as a nation within our meager resources to assist registration. So what is my cry? My cry is one, there are 17 million who are not registered. Their age group is largely defined. Probably about 9 or 10 million of those are below the age of 10 years. The other 9 million are potentially, anywhere between the age of 10 to 100. And some of them are potential voters. We are going to go back to the parish level. Right at the parish, we are working that our systems and our old and obsolete equipment is brought to speed. Our prayer, our cry for the different voices that we have across this country is, let us give this exercise at the time it occurs the importance that it deserves. Let us encourage our own to go and register. 2, I do not want to bury my head in the sand and say that the process is easy. The process has been constrained, as I have said, by 2 fundamental things, 2 fundamental ones. Staffing. Secondly, obsolete technology. If you see the presentations of NIRA for the last 5 years, and even the Auditor General's report, he highlights those 2 areas. Even to the House, If you start from 2019-2020 report, 2020-2021, he highlights understaffing, highlights obsolete technology. Highlights understaffing, highlights obsolete technology. NIRA's budget remains the same. Government issues a moratorium, don't recruit. But somehow in a miraculous way, services continue, of course within the constraints and within the framework of services that is provided for and appropriated in the House.
Rosemary, if you can take if you can hear me. Thank you so much for having given us that kind of preamble. You have set the stage well, and for clarifying on some figures, which I got. I'll be asking Isa how I got to 13, from 1.3 million to 13. And we've had the issue, you have clarified on the figures of those who have not yet collected their IDs. You have also took the issue of resources. If you had more resources, you could reach all the districts and maybe everywhere that you want to go. But we also appreciate that you have made some effort, and that effort can actually be seen by most Ugandans in what you're trying to do. And the next challenge is to go to the next generation of IDs that you are beginning soon. I'm going to ask my panelists who are here just to respond to what you have been able to present, in case they agree with you or disagree, or where they want to give some more information from where they sit, but also as Ugandans who have national IDs. Let me begin with you, Elizabeth Atori from ISA.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And again, it's wonderful to have Rosemary give us such great perspectives, and also to underscore some of the challenges in regards to with the NIRA services and why we are unable to reach as many people as we would have reached. One key thing that I definitely agree with is, as a country, in order to be able to efficiently provide services, particularly looking at the national ID system, we need to invest. And that means we need to invest resources, we need to invest in information, and we need to invest in participation for people. So whilst we are also thinking through how can we augment the NIRA budget, we also need to start thinking through how can we involve the people within this process. How can we ensure that they participate and are actually able to understand that they need to collect their IDs, that they need to go to the registration centers, that the mass enrollment is coming up soon, and these are the steps that they need to take. And I'm sure there are so many questions that people have around the mass enrollment, and I'm glad that NIRA is here with us even to provide that information on this great platform. In terms of numbers, for me, I believe what we need to see and to identify, and something that we've already talked about during this show, is if we even leave just 1 or 2 or even 10 people behind, because of the importance of a national ID, the impact of that on the livelihoods of the people that we leave behind is so great that we need to ensure that we are at 100%, and that might be difficult given the fact that as a nation this is the very first comprehensive system that we've had around identification, and there is definitely need for us to look through how we've done it this time in order to do it better. And I'm glad we are now going to the parishes with a mass registration. But can we go even further than the parishes? For those people like that are physically unable to move to the parish centers, is it possible for us to go to their homes, have reach outs of sorts? And I'll give you a very clear example of an intervention that we've done, and again with the support of NIRA from Kumi district. There was an older lady who was not registered. We've had a number of cases like that, and what we did was to get in touch with NIRA to have the registration officer to come to her locality as an organization. But we also understand the constraints that come with that type of resource, and it's definitely true that we need to increase budgetary resources. But in our planning and designing of the system, we've seen challenges around biometrics for older people, where they can't input their thumbprint because it's worn out. If we are designing the second system, is there a way we can ensure that for those particular biometrics, how do we collect it? Okay. For those that have gray hair and the cameras can't capture them, how do we ensure that even those ones are included in the new system? And I'm glad that we are thinking through new technologies for the next step of the ID system. So for me, this is just wonderful.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And again, Dr. Elizabeth Nansuruga, you have had the submission of the ED NIRA, yes. Rosemary Kisembo, a passionate submission about what she does. So the person, I think, who was like, give me the resources, give me the technology. I have the professionals, people who are skilled, ready to work. I think that's what I'm picking. Yeah. We are ready, we are able, we can do this, we have proven we can. Give us more resources and give us better technology. What do you make of her submission?
Thank you, ED. It's a great submission from the ED. And for me, the focus, I don't dispute anything. Yeah, it is totally correct. Like some of the challenges, like we earlier discussed, could be structure and some individual. But my focus is on the 17 million. How do we work with NIRA to get that 17 million unregistered? There are people who have tried to register for 3 years, have failed. Do you know what? You're under citizenship review. Why are you under citizenship review? Because your father named you using the maternal side, and then NIRA says, how come you're writing your Itesot but your name is Nansubuga? Now my father died, he named me alongside. There are those people. There are people who you don't have a copy of your father's ID, and I know NIRA has changed the guidelines. Now there's a gap between policy and implementation. NIRA headquarters would say, no, even if you don't have father's name, register the person. If I walked to match in the division, they will say, bring a copy of that ID. You know what my LC will tell me? Just declare your father dead. Now, it depends if I ever tried to register. So how do we work with NIRA to get the 17 million unregistered? Those issues, for me, that would be like the focus.
Of course, Rosemary is listening to you. So at one point, I'm going to get the microphone back to her and maybe to see how do we tackle the 17 million. But before we go back to Rosemary, Honorable Silas, the submission from the ED, what do you make of that?
Very clear submission, but one thing that I needed now to add on is to tell us, in terms of technology, how much money do we need to get it? In terms of the human resource, how much money are we missing? How much are we lacking? How much should the Parliament provide, so that we know the figures?
I am sure the department, the agents of government like theirs, they already have. They have already put in a request. I'm sure that they do.
Yes. So I think those details will be very, very important for Parliament to be able to see what they can be able to do together with the cabinet, because that is very, very, really vital. Of course, when you talk about technology and the need for technology, it is real. We can no longer be able to live the manual way because the population is running. The population is getting bigger and bigger. So I think it is the right time for us to support NIRA. At one point, as a Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, we visited them. We sat and we discussed about these issues. And the question of human resource, for instance, came up. And when we made the comparisons, they gave figures. If you look at the East African region, for instance, the budget that Kenya puts in, the number of staff, other countries, and you compare with others, you'll appreciate that NIRA has done something. Even with the small budget that we give them, they have done quite a good job. So we need to continuously improve and listen to them. Let's
go back to the Executive Director, NIRA, who is joining us from the Studio B. Rosemary, you've heard about the concern of the 17 million Ugandans who should be having national IDs and they don't have them yet. What is the strategy? How can we reach them? What kind of tools and support? Of course, one of them should be resources, financial. How do we get the 17 million registered?
What I would like to do is to bring to rest the fears of Ugandans. In the last exercise that took 8 months and was the first time and the first of its kind in East Africa, we registered 16.2 million and gave 15.8 million cards. So 17 million, based on the first experience, is a small number and is something that NIRA is capable of doing. Because in the first time, so in essence, it's not something that NIRA has never done before. Or let me use Government of Uganda, because NIRA was not yet created by there. Government of Uganda has ever carried out this registration in a period of 8 months and covered 16.2 million people. One of our presenters today mentioned the idea of going to the villages. Going to the villages, as she has highlighted, is something that we do on a case-by-case basis. But for purposes of ensuring that we are effective within our resources as a nation, it is important that even at the village level, household level, there is a mobilization that happens. There is a mobilization that happens to say, okay, we are going to be, NIRA is going to be in this region, and therefore can household leaders identify where they are very old people, and can we have, when they come, an effective exercise that like the time we took the kit for one person in one village, we could have done all the old people in that village if our mobilization had been done effectively. And for this, once again, I reach out and cry, not just to the media houses, but all the players that are involved. I'll go to the issue, and I will give some information. On our website, as I speak now, and for the last 1 year, we have had a document called Frequently Asked Questions on Mass Enrollment. But I can assure you that even Mr. Kamara has not seen it, or has not checked for it, or has not downloaded it, but has downloaded the report that will say that we have not worked. But so in essence, I also encourage you to obtain some of this. And I can pay good money to say that none of the persons seated on set today has accessed frequently asked questions on mass enrollment, which has been on our website since August 2022. That said, there are questions on citizenship review. Citizenship of any country is determined by the constitution of that country. NIRA's role is simply to effect and implement the provisions given within our legal framework. Now, dichotomies within information. It's good that the people seated on stage are professors, they are doctors, they are into research, and this is their area of expertise. When you have a dichotomy in information, it's called an exception and requires further investigation. I want to highlight to our viewers and my fellow presenters that our population has 1.5 million refugees living within our borders. Therefore, the risk of having an influx in citizenships from persons who are not citizens is higher than in any of our neighbors. The highest our nearest neighbors have in our 5 nations is 300,000. Uganda has 1.5 million, meaning there's a 5 times higher chance for somebody to want to become a refugee, a citizen in Uganda, than around the rest of us. Therefore, my cry is that help us, because you are giving this information. If you went to Makerere and said you are 10 years of age, they will go through an extraordinary step to verify if you are rightly there. So my request is that as communities, as people, as citizens, as different arms of government, let us work together to explain to people who a citizen is. Let us work together to say that, okay, if your father gave you Nansubuga, but you are from another clan, that is information you can capture on the form and say, and Buganda clans are very good because they even tell which clan the person is from. So in essence, the citizenship of this country is based on 4 people. Either your mother or your father or your grandparents must have been from an indigenous tribe that lived within the borders of Uganda before 3rd February 1926. Recently, I was listening to a young lady presenting her woes on social media. She'd been rejected a passport on the grounds that she's from a neighboring country. And I was glad that she was willing to admit that there is a challenge. There are those who came recently, and there are those who must be naturalized. So the issue of citizenship will go to resources not very far from today. So we need to be stringent on the grounds that tomorrow there will be a fight for resources between Ugandans and non-Ugandans who were registered illegally by NIRA. So that is the reason that we are taking extra steps to verify information around citizenship. The Honorable Member of Parliament asked, how much money does NIRA need? Cabinet approved a budget of 666,858,850,000, 666.8 billion shillings. Of that, 293 billion was allocated to the system. 193 billion was allocated to hiring persons at parish and sub-county level to participate in this noble exercise. That brings us to a total of 486 billion. 183 billion was allocated to ID cards. The ID cards for 24 million people. That brings us to 663. And the rest was allocated to logistics and that will support this exercise, e.g. fuel, movements of the staff, and all the other things that will make this exercise a success. Thank you.
Before I even come back to the panel, before I come back to the panel, Rosemary, I want to come back again to you and raise the issue of the number, the figures you have given. At first you said you're running with a budget of 59 billion, if I got you right. But now the money that you require is going to almost 600 billion to do what you want to do. I mean, I find that's really a huge jump to what you're already using today, and 600 billion, more than half a trillion, to run the next step. How do you come to that?
That, I have said of that, 293 billion is for the system. Of that, 116, of the 293, 116 billion is for kits, registration kits. A registration kit contains 10 items. There is a laptop, there's a document scanner, there's a fingerprint reader, there's an iris scanner, there is a camera, there is a signature pad. Sorry, the three don't come off my mind very easily. But if I go to the laptop, a 8 gigabyte laptop in Kampala is close to between 7 and 8 million. To that, if we add the iris scanner, that's another 7, bringing a kit to about 20 million before tax. The other one is tax. If you multiply 20 million to the 5,500 kits needed, actually we don't even have kits per parish because we have 10,717 parishes, but we are going to acquire 5,500 kits instead of 10,717. So the other is going to be a mathematics of, we will be moving as we did in 2014. Secondly, and maybe let me throw more light on that, a registration center will be set up at a parish for 3 days. That registration center will have a minimum of 10 computers. There will be Zone A, Zone B, Zone C, and Zone D, and information desk. At the information desk, we shall find LCs and elders, people who know the people who should be registering. In Zone A, it will be for the elderly pregnant women and children under the age of 5 or up to the age of 10. In Zone B, we shall have people who have never registered and don't have access to computers. There will be 2 computers at that zone. In Zone C, there will be people who will have gotten access to pre-register. They got access to maybe an internet cafe, and therefore they have registered their biographical biodata, but they have not, we will take their fingerprints at that Zone C. In Zone D, we will issue cards. So the bulk of this money is to replace our 10-year-old kids. And once again, I dare say to all the members seated on this panel that there is nobody with a 10-year-old phone. Even in this studio, if I asked for it, there will be no one with a 10-year-old phone. Even 5. So it's only NIRA that has 10-year-old computers but must perform miracles. Anyway, so the other balance from the 293.
Rosemary, hold on there.
There is equipment.
You have made your point, Rosemary. You've made your point,
prints-
Rosemary, and your point has been made and point has been taken. You need resources. You need the technology, and that's very clear. You have spoken with a lot of clarity on the issue, resources. But when I see what she's looking for, really, and considering the kitty that I see whenever there's a budget process, I'm not very optimistic on the 600 billion.
Yes,
that is the ideal. That's what she needs to do her job. Will that money be gotten?
That is the question. And when you look at that budget, it's nearly 8 to 9 times the current budget that they are spending. That jump is a serious one. And
but there's justification,
yes,
because they need equipment.
Justification is very clear, really, from the heartbeat of the people. That is what we need. And she has really asked that hard question, whether any of us here has a phone of 10 years. That's a solid one. She asks questions like a politician, a senior politician, and it's a serious one. So it's very, very difficult at a time where you hear that the Minister of Finance is saying they'll put a budget cut across the board, at a time when they are saying that you cannot recruit, including even at the NIRA, they are saying that you can't recruit, you can only do a replacement recruitment, some kind of thought. So it is a difficult situation. Getting 600, close to 700 billion at a go needs really everybody, first of all, to come and realize that the key thing that we need to do is to prioritize NIRA. Give them the budget. We need the human resource, we need the technology, we need a clean register, because that is the basis for all the service delivery that we need.
We're just coming from the system of merger and removal of some of government agencies.
Yes.
That also tells you the issue of resources.
Yes.
And
so
NIRA is one of the government agencies.
It's one of the government agencies.
Yes, and is one of the agencies. So it is a very, very difficult situation. But I can tell you, we need to have these conversations. All the key stakeholders must come on board, support cabinet, think with the cabinet. We don't want to put up a fight, but to fight with them to make sure that we overcome the burden which is before us, and the service should go.
Elizabeth Atori, before I go to Dr. Nansubuga, Uganda has over 1.5 million refugees. In fact, I'm told in some places in West Nile, the number of refugees has overtaken the number of the host communities. That's a very difficult issue to deal with, because if they have been here for 5 years, 10 years, before you know it, these are Ugandans in some way. I mean, how do you deal? Remember, neighboring districts that are neighboring other countries, we have the same ethnic communities. They are actually in South Sudan. Like people who speak my language, which is Rutoro, are many more in Congo than we are in Uganda. And it could be the same in Teso region, it's the same in
Yes.
the Luo. People who speak Acholi are many more in South Sudan, and they have come here because of war. How do you deal with this? 1.5 million. The highest other country that has a high number of refugees are only 300,000.
Yeah, and that's definitely a challenge, I think, that we will face in terms of registration of citizens. And we need to segment, because there are the refugees, then there are the communities that live on the borders. So that share the borderline, for example, with Tanzania, with Kenya, and that oftentimes will move from one village of Uganda to the next one in Kenya. And some of these movements are even seasonal. So you'll see that in the Karamoja region, they'll tell you for this particular season we are in the other neighboring country, and then thereafter we are in Uganda. And some of these challenges we've seen in our research, when those communities start to spotlight that they are unregistered. For some of them, in fact, you'll find that during the time of mass registration, they were not within Uganda, and they were actually in the other country. So there is a real challenge in terms of defining who's the Ugandan who should be getting a national ID. But there are also communities and people, and the ED did talk about them, that have been naturalized to then now become, and to come and say 100% I could be Ugandan. And we need to be able to separate those from the ones that are refugees, or be able to provide those ones with the documentation that they need.
Let me give you this to Dr. Nsubuga. Could you explain the context of citizenship review and name issue, you know?
Thank you. I want to go back to what the ED has described. That one was for refugees, but I want to focus on particular children who are excluded from a system. I'm Elizabeth Nsubuga, but that Nsubuga, maybe my father is an Itesot. So when I fill in the NIRA form, what is your tribe, ethnicity, I fill in Itesot. But the NIRA officer is reading, but you've said you're Elizabeth Nsubuga, and this is a family like Ofo. All of them, their father, out of love, named them based on the mother-in-law. And they need access to services. They cannot access art.
Really?
Yes.
It's
a family we have visited.
Has to question my name.
No,
then
now that is a bit. Now those are a bit of the legal reviews, because when I'm being named, how I'm given the names, and it's an actual scenario. And this is a person they have failed. The whole family has failed to access services. NIRA, the office in that particular district, they are aware. They have moved. They have tried, because of that naming issue, that I feel in I am Atori, and maybe the tribe is
Amuganda.
Yeah, the name doesn't belong. So you read, when you see Elizabeth Nsubuga, your mind tells you this is Amuganda. But on that form for NIRA, I have filled in ethnicity as Itesot. So these two don't match. Then they say bring documents, but you're saying my father was an Itesot,
so
and a man Itesot. So there are also those.
So you're saying that the ethnicity should be proven by name?
Now that is what is being implemented. I know at NIRA in terms of the guidelines, but when you go to the implementation of what the officer is doing, is doing that other judgment, no, you will come back. So you find people being excluded. And then that particular case, the person has said, I have done S4 results. This is what I filled in. Because they were even guided. Maybe just change and put an Itesot name. Or you just put tribe as this. So you choose. And then this child said, I have to think of, I've already done S4. This is what I have on my documents. And that was their highest level. So they do not want, that is their highest qualification, and the document they hold dear.
You know,
so there are all those cases of
I am Patrick, Elizabeth, and Silas. There's none of us is Caucasian, but we have Caucasian name and we're okay with it. How can I be having a name like Nsubuga and it's a problem, somebody to present myself
and those are the issues we want.
Why should I be accepted as a Patrick and I'm not even Caucasian, and that's acceptable?
Patrick, I believe the question really is the criteria for assessment.
Let me go back now to the ED.
And we should ask NIRA.
Let me go back.
Patrick, let me first tell you, I have had people who have said, I have never even moved out of Uganda, I've never even moved out of Kampala, but now I have to explain. And you know that context of your citizenship review, a person says, and I totally understand the ED, because I've raised it with NIRA before. They've said, okay, now there's a directorate for citizenship, and these are the what. But now the implementation, and I know NIRA has changed some guidelines, but now when you reach the officer, and I've seen where the LCs have said, no, if you don't have your father's documents, please just go and say, that your father is dead.
And
for me, for vital statistics, then when we use the information from NIRA and we are looking at statistics, then we are having wrong data. I am certain in the NIRA database, many fathers are dead. They are not dead because I cannot bring a relative, a male relative.
Let me go back to the ED.
And Patrick, might be before, just to add on the point that Elizabeth is making, and a point that very closely resembles that is the question of registration of children of war in northern Uganda. So we know for a long time we had that war in northern Uganda.
Yes.
And many returnees are now coming back and they want to be registered. Their mothers are Ugandan. Perhaps their fathers are from our neighboring state with the rebels and all. But if we are using the criteria of either mother or father or grandparents are Ugandan, these children could possibly have the opportunity to be registered. But what is happening is that they are unable to get registered because they can't prove the paternity. Yeah. Or even within their own clans, the returning clans are rejecting these children. So we have those isolated cases that need to be dealt with also inclusively.
All right. Let me go back to Studio B, and I hope the ED NIRA has heard your questions and your concerns. The issue of citizenship review and name issues, Rosemary, how do we go about them? How do you go about them?
I want to start with the children of war. Because with the children of war, we have recognized that challenge. Because some of them don't even want to be associated with their communities because of the atrocities and all the other things that happened to them or they were participatory in. So we have a special program for them, and I'm not going to highlight it because in highlighting it, I will be also setting them into discrimination. So we have a special program with them. We are working with certain entities to ensure that they get registered. So the children of war, we are aware of them. We are even looking for psychosocial supports during the process of registration, because they might break down narrating their life story and all that. So they are a special case, they're in specific regions, and there is support and, you know, definite care for them. Now I'll go to citizenship review. I honestly don't want to spend a lot of time on 1 in a million cases or 1 in 100,000 cases. The case-by-case basis, what I hear from this and which I will take away with me is we need to, there is an identification and registration committee, which is like a quasi-judicial committee that listens to grievances. If you feel NIRA has not done you well, the law provides for that committee. They called it a committee and not a tribunal in the law. So that committee listens to persons who feel aggrieved by our process or by our decisions. And for the extremes whereby we have refused to be reasonable at all, I am confident that these people can stand between us and our clients and offer and achieve and obtain justice. That said, I will find that officer quite irrational when somebody says that my father just gave me a name, but they can speak at a so and whatever. But that said, I could look at that particular case and you could send all the list of them. If maybe they have approached you, you could submit to NIRA and we look at the 100 or 500 or 5,000 cases who are in that category. However, citizenship review is based on the features of a tribe. For example, you are not going to say you are a Muganda and come up with a clan that is not in their 52. Because even the Waganda won't recognize you. You are not going to say that you are an Acholi, and your clan falls nowhere in the Acholis, but for you are an Acholi. Those parameters were set before us in 1926. So my prayer is that there are exceptions, there are people who are suffering, there are people who have their documents queried unjustly. There is a recourse to handling their grievances, and we can address them. We can, if a citizen, if a civil society has them, give us the list and let us handle them case by case. But that is not going to discourage us from looking for, because we are mandated by law to maintain an accurate, reliable database or register. And some of those accuracies are based on the parameters that define the tribes that are in the 56, the Schedule 3, that are in the 56 tribes that are in the Constitution of Uganda.
Quick question. If I may ask a very quick question, can somebody be denied registration because there seems to be a problem with the name? Somebody is a Nansubuga and is claiming to be an Itoset. Just because of that, can that be a problem for someone to be registered? Just a name?
Viewed. Because that name is not recognized. Even if you went today to that tribe and said this is the name, they will say, are you sure? So that is, we don't deny them, but we will flag it as an unusual occurrence that needs further, further interviewing or interacting with the client to establish further and better particulars.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. I find that very strange because people have picked names that really, I think there should be other parameters to look for other than a name to determine, ethnicity, other than just a name, because people can pick. Like, for example, people here in Uganda and even in Acholi sub-region have been changing the names when they think it is associated with something that's not good. For example, somebody who was Komakechi is now Komagum, for those who know Luo. Somebody who was, we have new names in Uganda that were not Sanyu, Mukisa, Kwagala Kwa Yesu, things like this, and they're not there. And those are the names because people feel like part of the tradition is associated with something negativity, so they're coming out with other names. So how would you deal with such people?
And Patrick, if we are really talking about the type of data that we are collecting, and if we want it to be accurate data, then we need to be able to lift some of these requirements. Because then what we will see is if I'm not able to register a Tory, then I'll do what they were recommending, change your name and provide a certain sort of name. And that's why there is a challenge. At least I've had a discussion with some of the NIRA registration officers. They'll say that people come to pick up their ID and they don't know what name they used for the ID. So they'll again start the system afresh, the registration system afresh. But then within the system will flag that registration when they see that the print is repeated on the system. And that speaks to what type of data are we collecting as a nation, and how can we put systems in place that ensure that that the processes are not so stringent that people need to lie about the data that they're collecting. We've seen this with the registration of learners on education, when they were requiring learners to bring both your parents' ID for the mother and for the father. So what the learners were doing is they were picking uncle's ID or the neighbor's ID to represent their father for learners that don't have their fathers present. We have so many single mothers in this nation. So what sort of information and data are we collecting? In the system, it will register that this is the father of this particular person. And yet, in real sense, there are real questions around that data. So we need to be able to make the system work for people, so that when the people come to register, they are providing relevant information that is actually accurate.
Doctor, yes, sir.
Just to add something, like talking about leaving no one behind, the SDGs, that even these fewer people who are being excluded, they are being affected by accessing a bank account, social services, and even getting a SIM card. If you have registered four of us, because we don't have national IDs, then you get your closer person. Do you know what happens? You just go to MTN, and then MTN will say, oh, but you already have the 5 maximum. You just say, drop any of those. You just drop. So that these kids say, oh, when your line is now off, just to know the person who helped to register. So which data? So we are talking of accurate data, but I guarantee you, NIRA has a lot of dead fathers. They are not dead. Even the LC will advise you. If you want to have a smooth process, they will even write, father dead, DISO, where is this? Or when people ask, bring a document of a relative, and you just pick for a border, and it is there. You want to pick the stories, go to a NIRA at the different offices. But we want to ensure that the system is responsive. I don't know who has told me about naming, apart from knowing my tribe and how I want to name. I have seen people who don't have any local name that if you went, it would not be identified. When Clinton came in '98, there are people who named.
There are so many Obamas in this town now.
Which tribe would recognize
even in my village.
And then also when you go to the local language, not everyone will. I think I contested at some point at Passport when they would say Baganda line up here and all this, and you say, no, don't identify. And you know, as people talking in lines, they would say, but you don't look an Itesot, you're too light-skinned. So you see how people would. So we need also to become responsive of those laws. The patriarchy, just
I think the people who make laws should go back and read this, you as members of parliament, and try to rectify some of things like this. We're just more than a name. We're better than that.
Many challenges. Now, when you look at a person like me as a politician, I have tried my best always to support mothers when they are going to deliver. There are many children who have been named after me. Somebody even named a girl child. They have given my name. And what are you going to say? They name them outward because they are attached. Yes, they have attached it to the importance of what I did at the time when they needed that service. So what are you going to do about that? We have a situation where we have people who are not Itesos, registered Itesos, and they bring the accent of another tribe to the real writing of the name. There are people who exchange the letter L with letter R. So they are part of making the several errors that we have in the IDs. But what are we doing to cure that? So sometimes I've been...
For example, if you register here in Uganda,
yes,
and you are a Kamara like me,
yes,
chances are that they will rate you as Kamala.
Kamala, yes. And that is it.
Chances are, the later person, they will say, if you're not very keen to say, please end with R-A.
Yes.
Many times I've gone to write, I have to go back to say, please, R-A.
R-A. So they will
rate Kamala. And if you are a Wamala, and you're registering in Western Uganda, chances are
Ramala.
They will call you Wamara because they don't have Elo. Because there's language 1 to language 2 interruption. There's the way how we pronounce.
So when we make such a complaint, someone might think that is being tribalistic. No, it is real. So we need to make sure that we take people to register, people whom they understand properly. And then you give the support supervision. Also identify that gap. There seems to be lack of a clean supervision on the officers who are on the final mile. Yes. Who is there to watch to see what that person is doing? When you misregister my name, that is already a burden on me. Because tomorrow they will tell me, you are going to travel to Kampala, you are going to pay 50,000, but you, the person who made the error, you go back. You keep quiet.
It's also incumbent upon us to make sure that if you are registering, I mean, be very clear that your name is registered right.
But I don't know what you enter in the system.
And might be just, Patrick, to bring us to speed. There was a particular tribe in this nation for a long time that wasn't being registered because it was not listed under the tribes in the constitution, the Maragoli.
The Maragoli?
The forest,
yes.
I think somewhere.
Yes, and it's only recently that they were now recognized as one of the pertinent tribes. But now that brings us to the challenge of using that as a criteria. Is there any other way that we can identify
I think again that
who
goes
is
back to
Ugandan
that
without
goes back
the
to Parliament
basis
now,
of
because Rosemary is working on the law that is provided. But,
Yeah,
but let me go back to the ED, NIRA. The issue now, what needs to be done when somebody is registering, and what do you say about the single mothers, I'm told, who are having problems?
Well, I will start with the accuracy of the register. A rose, Shakespeare said a rose by any name is a rose. And I think that one pertains very well to our register, because the foundation of our register is not your name, it's your biometrics. So your name can be whatever you want it to be, but the NIN is issued to the uniqueness of your biometrics. I repeat that. And NIN of your biometrics and not your name. Is issued to the uniqueness of your biometrics. Therefore,
A technical hitch there. Rosemary, we're going to come back to you. We're having a technical hitch. The audio was not very good. So you can see the most important thing is your biometric.
Yeah, but
Your biometric really identifies you, is unique anywhere in the world.
The issue we're saying, I can't even get a NIN. These children can't even get a NIN.
But
I think, Patrick, we need to define what biometric is for the viewers. Under the law, the Registration of Persons Act, there is specific information that a person needs to provide when they are getting a national ID. One of them is the name, the other one is the tribe. So this is embedded in our law. It's not per se that it's NIRA. NIRA is an agency that implements, and that's supposed to be able to roll out the system. But if the challenges are within the law and the particular requirements of the information that a person is supposed to provide, and then how that law is being implemented, that's something that we need to look into more. If we are talking about biometrics, what is this thing called biometrics, right? And in terms of biometric information, is there a way we can ease in the process for every individual, so that even the ones with the disabled, the ones who don't have fingerprints, can be able to register, the ones who are blind, and some of these other biometric inefficiencies that were highlighted in the Auditor General's report. So my question really is, can we demystify what biometrics is, and then can we then be able to ensure that the biometric system that we are adopting in the new ID system, now we have learned from the 10 years that we have had this system. When we are adopting the new system, we are going into greater technologies. How have we adopted the new system to be able to cater for the challenges that we've seen in the old system?
Okay, I'll be trying to reconnect once again with Rosemary, but the issue, you are passionate about the single mothers and having problems registering their children. What do you know about that? What exactly challenge are you talking about? What do they go through according to you?
Yeah, your parents separated. And at 16, when I want to get the ID, I am required. And I have verbatim from children who have said, I have not seen my father for 16 years. I start looking for him for an ID if you're the father. Or your mother never told you those issues. You're the collateral damage. For you, you want an ID at S4 or to get. And most women, because of the circumstances, let's be realistic, their children born to priests, there is rape, there is incest, different circumstances, even if you knew. But at that point, you need details of that male relative. You've only known this side. So you see the challenges.
So this is why you say there could be many men who have been declared dead.
Yeah, no, they are declared dead. That one I know from the side of vital statistics that the data is going in. Because from interacting with some of those children, they say, no, I was even advised like this. So I'm thinking like, yeah, and they said it's easier. No, and you find there are no issues for the mother side, because most people will have. But how people end up just picking the documents, because the officers are more particular about the paternal ID than the maternal ID. So there is more criteria. No, where is this? You say it's dead. Say, but I'm lucky if I say he's dead, they won't ask for a death certificate. So you easily pass. Then if you say, no, and others have said, can I move to another district just to get a copy from a person I have not seen or not heard from, or now I have to ask my mother, please tell me the details of this person. But what of people born due to modern reproduction? There is no father.
If you can digress a little bit, Silas, there is a problem. I don't know, maybe us men, we're now scared of our duties, or we are cowards. But if you see maybe 10 women probably who are having children, maybe 7 of them are single mothers. What's going on?
I think that is where we have reached. The country has moved, the world has moved. We are moving towards those areas. But I think for me, quickly, all we need now to do is to review our frameworks that we have. Most especially, let us look at the laws. Where we have a problem, a crack, let us see how we can glue it together. I see now a problem of the regulations, for instance. For you to implement an act of parliament, you need regulations from the minister. And it is even easier to amend them as compared to the laws. So where we can be able to do that, we should quickly do that. So all the key stakeholders should come together. Let us listen to the people. It's very, very critical. Let's listen to the testimonies, to the stories. They will help us to get the right medicine to this challenge. And we shall sort it.
Okay, Silas, I understand now we have a reconnection once again in our Studio B with Rosemary Kisembo, the Executive Director, NIRA. You are trying to say what matters most is the biometric. And the question that we had put to you is, what do you do to the women who have children, and the children, the fathers are not in the picture, and sometimes they're asked to bring the name of their fathers who are unavailable and they don't have it. What do you do to those?
First of all, I would like to explain what biometrics I mean by biometrics. It's the face, it's the fingerprint, and in the new system, it will also be the iris. So we are adding a biometric to this register, which will be the iris. So it's your face, it's your fingerprint, it is something that only you, is unique to only you, and is present on your body. It is present not on your mother's body, not on your father's body, it's present on your physiological body, whatever the word is. I may have not used the right one, but it's present with you and is unique. There is nobody else with that feature in the world. So in response to what they have raised about the aging out of a fingerprint, we are adding the iris to the register, because we will see it through the lenses and pick its unique print, even if you are blind or whatever the circumstances might be. So the exclusion, I want to hesitate to use the word exclusion, because ours is a register for everybody. So there is nobody that we are setting out to exclude. And I really want to be very clear on that one. And emphasize that you can seek redress if you are aggrieved with the Identification and Registration Committee. You mentioned that if people change names from Komagum, Komakech, Komagum, Komagum is still an Acholi word and Langi word for blessed one, but is still a word in a certain dialect in that country. So the way our constitution ascribes citizenship, you must be linked with a certain tribal community. And therefore, we seek to ascertain from the information that we capture that you are linked to that biodata. If there are gaps, because also, please let us accept, let us not just argue for argument's purposes. There are Sudanese who come and say they are Baganda. And they want to get an in, and they know nothing about Baganda culture. And they are not Ugandans. So let us look at this If the situation exists, how do we resolve it? Where are the grievance mechanisms? Rather than saying no, than having blanket emotional, responses to this. There are grievance mechanisms if you feel that you are aggrieved, but that is not going to stop us from making every effort to seek out to know if you are a Ugandan. Because we are proud of this country, and so are so many others who are not. On the issue of your name being written Kamala Kamara, the information desk will be there this time. Go to the information desk, and in this time the additional thing that we have added is you can go online and capture your own data, and please get it right. Capture your own data and just come and we capture your biometrics. So in essence, that is the other issue. On the issue of the Maragoli, but I also need to add, registration assistants are usually from that region. We hire from that region. So I also want to correct that fallacy. We hire people from that region because they know the names, they know the culture, they know everything about that region. Now, Maragoli. We are not the ones who did not put Maragoli in the Constitution of Uganda. I request that the efforts be taken to where it ought to be taken to recognize the Maragoli. The effort be taken to Parliament. The day they add Maragoli, on that day we shall register them as Maragoli, without further ado. On the last issue that is becoming, is taking a life of its own, it is not true that we insist on your father, and if you don't have a father, kill him. No, those are characteristics of individuals, and the individual should be flagged, named and shamed, but it should not be attributed to the institution. All we require is that you must give us one of your parents, and I emphasize, in keeping with the Constitution, either your father or your mother or your grandparents. So if there are individuals who are misbehaving, they need to be isolated, named and shamed. Simple. But the institution should not be said that it is insisting that you give a father. No. Actually, some people want to give their father, not their mother. So for us, we are interested in either father or mother or grandparents. One of the three. I mean 4, because actually they are not 4. One of the 6, because you have grandparents on your mother's side or grandparents on your father's side, and your mother or father. Any of those can bestow on you citizenship. And we are interested in that information, of at least one of those, period. Once you give us any of those, and your information is consistent, we shall register you. And please allow us to review the information. Because even when you go to Makerere, and you say that you sat S6 when you were 10 years, they will look for further and better particulars. So allow us to review information that is inconsistent. Please do allow us. Thank you.
I'll come back to you, Dr. Nansubuga Elizabeth, on the issue of somebody who wants to register and they are insisting they should bring a father. I think now that has been put to rest. The ED is insisting if you can just bring one of them, they are good to go.
Yeah, but I can explain.
I mean it is as clear as that.
And from the beginning I said, I am truly aware that the policy at NIRA allows for the different mother or grandparents. The issue is implementation. So there is a gap between policy and implementation. If you walked to a division...
So she talked about there could be an individual officer who
the
probably
implementation
has it, but
guidelines.
that's not the way how NIRA is doing
and
their
that's
thing.
why I said I am truly aware what is, because we have raised it with NIRA and we have got that feedback. I am totally aware that at the policy level, it allows mother and what, but tomorrow walk in and say, this is the only document I have.
Okay.
So that it's a gap between the policy and the implementation or the guidelines that different people
individual officers.
Yes, in the registration.
Individual officer.
Understanding of their understanding and trying to prove that you're Ugandan is being proved through paternal. But I am truly aware that at policy level, it allows father, mother, I can bring any. And that's what NIRA has said. But at the registration, implementation, the gap between policy and practice. The policy is there, it's right. What is the practice?
Okay, Silas.
Yes, because my complaint is maybe around the capacity building of these people who register people. Sometimes maybe they have baked. We must talk about realities now here. It could be that they are not well prepared to handle the job. Because if you are not able to provide the options and you just plant one thing and say, this is it, and it's a must, and yet the policy is speaking another matter, about another matter, then it's a serious...
But according to the ED, those are exceptions, not the norm.
Those exceptions,
they happen
you see,
according to individual officers who have...
You see, we are saying leaving no one behind. Those people may be few, but they are really at pain. And for me, I'm concerned about those few who cannot see what their right is. Okay. They've got a right, and what are we doing about it?
So in the remaining 10 minutes, I want to ask you what you think should be done moving forward. The mistakes or the challenges we faced in the first 10 years, how can we correct them moving forward, in your view?
Patrick, I believe, in my view, it depends on the approach that we are taking for registration. If the approach we take is a one-size-fits-all approach, we are bound to leave some people behind. What we need to do is identify the different people who need the registration, the different demographics. The persons with disability need a separate service, and I'm glad that in the second ID system, there is a special desk now put for those particular people. But we need to do more. Let's be able to reach them. Whilst we have the opportunity for the mass registration, let's be able to mobilize. Let's be able to include information, provide information to everyone to understand that this particular registration is going to be done. If we are able to segment the various people who need the registration and according to their needs provide these services, and I'm glad now we are even starting to think of the children of war and provide special focus for this particular demographic. Let's do the same for also the other vulnerable persons. And I believe once we are also able to put in collective efforts, and the ED did speak to the role of civil society. What can civil society do in the process? Civil society is very good at mobilizing and being able to rally the support of communities. But in order to do that, civil society needs information. Citizens need information. If they are to participate effectively in government processes, they need to be able to understand where to come in terms of participation. What are the timelines, for example, for the registration that is upcoming? When should we expect to see this registration happening? These are some
the ED will go through that.
These are some of the critical information that would be very pertinent in terms of participation. But I believe this is a very good time for us as a nation to start to think through how do we ensure that every Ugandan gets a national ID? Okay. How do we ensure that the delays in the system are taken care of? In terms of technology, we know that there's been challenges around system failures within the districts. Let us be able to put in place technology that is adaptable to our circumstances. I believe if we take a human rights-based approach to registration, to ensure that not even one person is left behind, because the impact of that on the livelihood of that particular person. And that's why you'll see that so many people are out to say, oh, NIRA is doing this, or NIRA is doing, is not covering us. But it's because of the pain that the people get when they are not registered. So for me, I would call upon all of us to be as inclusive in our system. And for inclusion, we need equity, not equality. So whilst we might say, oh, the system is to cover everyone, for a system to be able to cover everyone, we need to look at each of the specific groups, and how then do we ensure that all the interests are covered.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. And Dr. Nansubuga, are there any ongoing research initiatives or academic studies that evaluate the efficacy of the system, and what are the findings?
Not efficacy, but we are working in partnership with IUSSP. We are working on some of the ethics and human rights related to children who might be excluded from the registration systems, birth registration and national ID. But we acknowledge all that NIRA has done, but we're only looking how can we improve as we go to the second generation, so that a further group of children or populations are not left behind.
And Silas, as a people's representative, Kumi municipality, what do they tell you, the challenges they face, mostly what comes up?
You know, first of all, there are many people who want to travel to Kampala because of registration issues. Yet there's a center in what? In Kumi. They would love to come this way. Those are challenges. There are people
that's because of lack of information, maybe.
Lack of information. People need to be educated. People need to be supported. People need to see the leaders go down to them. So I think it's also high time NIRA strengthens their partnership with other stakeholders. For instance, now members of parliament, politicians need to come on board to support these processes. You know, people listen to that voice. The churches need to be brought on board, the religious, the cultural institutions, because each of us has a role to play. So we need to talk to the people. But it's only very, very nice that we go down and listen to the testimonies from the people. You feel it. You feel it yourself, and you'll say, yes, we don't want to leave anybody behind. Because at the end of the day, without an ID, you are going to miss a lot. Gone are those days when we used to take IDs for granted. When government was coming up with this, some people were quite negative. But today, I can tell you, people have known the importance of getting registered and having what? An ID. So the people, when you go to them and listen to them, recently I sat in Kumi with the people, and one of the questions that came from the gathering was the issue for IDs. The leaders need to give more time to the voters. So the matters which are coming from there, the processes are not easy. They are complicated. People want to have systems which are credible but simplified.
Okay, let me go back to the Executive Director NIRA, and we are almost coming to the end of our program this evening. I just want to know, how can lessons learned from the challenges with the first generation system inform the successful implementation of the new Ndagamuntu? And if you could, with clarity, give us the kind of program on how the next system will be implemented, the timelines.
It is envisaged that to go around each district will take us 2.5 months in a rotational manner. So it will all start at one go. We will all start moving at a go, but we will take 2.5 months to rotate around the district, and we'll try to do it 2 or 3 times. And therefore, if all goes, I want to ask the parliamentarians to stand with us. Hopefully the supplementary budget will highlight the finances needed for this exercise. And as persons who are in touch with their communities, please stand with us to get the necessary financing for this effort. I want to say that we have endeavored to build relationships have met with 8 different groups of members of parliament in the last 2 years. At Kololo, the ones for the Sage, the ones for different regions, the ones for Pakodia, several groups to discuss how we can improve our service delivery. And I think there is also some basic information that can be shared. For example, there are districts that have our offices. That is information that civil societies and parliament can share, parliamentarians. There is an office of NIRA here. Don't go to Kampala. As people who are in touch with the people. There are also people, we don't want to leave anybody behind, but there are some people who need convincing. And I'll give an example. There are some people who think the NIN is the 666. And they are saying they are not going to get the NIN because there's in parts of the eastern region, there's a very strong group that feels that this is the 666 and they are not going to. So there are groups who have the ear and of people can reach out to these people and explain to them that it's only a means of improving service access. So the timelines right now, the program is drawn out and should take 6 to 8 months when it starts. However, all this is leaning on the issuance of funds to the entity. I cannot overemphasize that enough. Have we made changes from the lessons learned? Yes. One fundamental change is that you will not have to go back exactly to the place where you registered if you want to make changes or if there was some wrong with your picture or something. That we are having a more centralized and distributed approach rather than the other decentralized whereby you were limited only. You had to go back to the exact district where you took the picture and all that, excuse me, in order to make changes to who you look like. So by all means, every effort has been made to address the challenges of the current technology. The other fundamental change and drive we are having to address our challenges is to promote birth registration. Because the reason we are having mass enrollment is, Mr. Kamara, you are well heard in this country. Can you kindly tell people to register their children before they are 1 year old? We won't have a mass enrollment exercise in 10 years if that happens. It can become your mantra. Please register your children before they are one year old. Many of us go for birthday parties of 1 year olds. Can we encourage them? We have cultural leaders, we have MPs. Can you kindly ask your persons to register before they are 1 year old? That is the one sure way to get the most accurate data, but also to ensure that we don't have a repeat of these exercises.
I'm going to give the panelists here, each one of you, about 30 seconds to make your concluding remark, and I'll go back to Rosemary to close it. So, Elizabeth Satori, your parting shot.
Oh, thank you very much, Patrick. I believe for us at this particular juncture in time, it's a time that as a nation we sit down to think, are we able to ensure that every single Ugandan gets an ID because of the impact of not having an ID on their lives, the impact on health, education, and social protection. And in order to do that, we must ensure that the systems work. The system must not create a barrier, but instead open up and encourage people to actually move forward and get the registration. So once we are able to make our Ndagamuntu work for everyone, because identity is a right, and if we are to achieve the vision of having every single Ugandan registered and having services accessible by the people, then we need to be able to incorporate every single person. And for us, that is a call that we will continue to have, and it's really a call to action for every single person. For Parliament, let's make the laws that are helping. For NIRA, let's be able to make the system easy for everyone. And for the academics, whilst we are making recommendations, let's also be in touch with the realities. So for me, those are my petitions. Thank you.
Briefly, Dr. Nansubuga Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. In ensuring that no one is left behind from the registration system, let's have legal reforms which are adaptive, inclusive, and adapting to the evolving needs. But also let's ensure, another recommendation would be to ensure the effective translation of policies into implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Silas. Your parting shot.
To all of you who stayed with us, we thank you so much. And also to thank you, Kamara, for hosting us here and the fellow panelists. I think we've done quite well. And for me, let's provide NIRA with the money that they need for technology, but also the human resource. They need more supervision, monitoring, and then evaluation to see how things are moving. Let's make life easier for the citizens. They need this document. We should not leave anybody behind.
Thank you very much. Let me come back to you, Rosemary. In just a minute, your concluding remark.
Well, I would like to make it clear that only those above 16 are entitled to an ID, but the rest are entitled to a NIN. So I would encourage all of us to register and be allocated a NIN as a Ugandan. It is your right. It is your birthright. It is. I like the anthem that has been created by primary schools, where they say, my birthright, my name and NIN are my birthright. So your NIN, your ID, if you're entitled, is your birthright. 2, I would like to thank you, Mr. Kamara, for hosting us and allowing us this opportunity to pass on information. And 3, I would like to call up all of us to work together to enable every Ugandan enjoy their birthright. Barriers exist inside and outside NIRA, and I would like us to work together to overcome these barriers. Thank you.
Very much, Rosemary Kisembo, Executive Director, NIRA. Thank you very much, Dr. Nansubuga Elizabeth, lecturer at Makerere University. Thank you, Atori Elizabeth from ISRA, and thank you, Honorable Silas Argon, MP for Kumi Municipality. But most of all, thank you, the viewer, for having been with us. We thank you, and we're grateful for your company. And this is where we come to the end of our programming on this particular issue. Leaving no one behind, assessing Uganda's readiness for the new Ndagamuntu.